Well, good day to all of you out there, and welcome to the webinar, What is Financial Reporting, or Financial Reporting Basics, whatever it was advertised as. My name is Craig Messenring, and I represent HCG, Harbinger Consulting Group, and we're based out of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and we provide training, consulting, product sales, etc. in the business intelligence software arena, specializing in Oracle Hyperion EPM. We are a gold partner. We provide custom tailored applications in the consulting area besides health checks, consultants coming out to your site, and in the training area, of which I belong, we have an approved education center, Oracle approved education center in Phoenix, and not on this slide, but we also have one in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And besides providing Oracle Hyperion training, we do custom training solutions, on-site training, virtual training over the web, etc. So let's get right into the basics of the webinar here. I'll start with a little discussion of reporting tools that are currently available, although this webinar is concentrating on financial reporting. And there are many reporting tools, and what each do and the data sources to which they can connect can become confusing. And so you might have heard of some or all of these products and wondering what they do. And I'll simplify the explanation of each of these products. Some have more focused capabilities, and others have a broad set of capabilities, which brings along with it a longer learning curve. Financial reporting, the one we're discussing today, is focused on the creation of highly formatted production-type quality reports, and also the distribution of those reports across your enterprise. Financial reporting itself is an application-based studio as opposed to web-based. And financial reporting allows for the creation of these reports, whereas the distribution of the reports takes place through workspace, as we will see. And financial reporting is the focus of this webinar. SmartView and its older counterpart, the S-based spreadsheet add-in, which you may be familiar with, are both Excel add-ins, and they're good for the rapid creation of ad hoc reports and analysis of data that is within a multi-dimensional data source like S-base. And it's used within a familiar Excel environment. But its output is primarily in the form of a spreadsheet, although there are more visual views of the data like charts that can be obtained through something called the Report Designer. Web Analysis has its web-based studio as opposed to application-based, from which you create what are called documents as opposed to reports, which can contain spreadsheets that look very much like SmartView spreadsheets, but they can also view the data in charts and pinboards, and you can add controls to the document like option buttons, checkboxes, and drop-down lists, from which the user can use those controls to select items that they want to appear in the pages or in the point of view, and change the data displayed quite easily. Interactive reporting, it's sort of a combo platter of both financial reporting and web analysis. And it's an all-in-one tool for querying, analyzing, and reporting. But because of these broad capabilities, it takes longer to learn to use it to its fullest. And lastly, there's OBIEE, Answers and Dashboard. And it's Oracle's product that covers all of the bases. It connects to almost any data source and can be used for ad hoc reporting, but also the creation of dashboards that high-level management people want to see, and it can also be used to create pixel-perfect reports for distribution. So that's a little bit of an overview of what reporting tools are out there, but let's concentrate on financial reporting. Financial reporting, it's an application-based studio, which I'll show you right here. I've already fired it up here, so I'm going to show it to you here. Here's financial reporting. I'm looking in what is called the Explorer view of things right now, where I can look at all of the financial reports that have been created and launch them from here. But more likely, when you're building a report, you're going to press this button here, and now you're in this financial reporting studio. And I happen to be building report 1 at this time. But it's an application-based studio, as it says. And yes, it's used for financial and compliance reporting. And if you're familiar at all with the Oracle BI Publisher, financial reporting is a lot similar to it. Financial reports are created out of that application-based reporting studio that I just showed you. And the key to it is that these reports contain any or all four different types of objects: grids, charts, images, and text boxes. And those are combined to create individual reports. So up to now, all we've been talking about is Financial Reporting Studio and how to create them. Here, we're going to then take those reports and view them from Workspace, because the viewers of your reports don't necessarily want to create reports, so they just want to look at them, and so they'll view them in Workspace. And then, as we'll get to at the end of the webinar, they can combine a bunch of reports into books so that it's very easily accessible for them, just the reports they want. If in the midst of 1,000 reports they only look at 50 on a regular basis, they can easily combine those into what is called a book and access them very easily. And then, lastly, via Workspace, you can take a bunch of reports, a bunch of books, many different items there, and schedule them for mass distribution across your enterprise in what is called a batch. Here's a financial reporting example on a slide with, I talked about 4 different objects. There's a text object, there's an image object, there's a grid, and there's a chart. But let's look at it a little more dynamically here in Financial Reporting Studio. I'm going to go back to the Explorer window by pressing this button. This button represents a repository. Here's my repository of all the reports and all the folders that I have access to. And I'm going to view this report called All Objects. I'm just going to double click on it, and there it appears in my studio. Now, this isn't really viewing the end result of it, because this is where you would create it and edit it and do different things with it, as we'll see in a moment. But from here, as you're building your report, you could say, yes, I want to print preview it. So I just press the print preview button up here, and it opens up in a PDF format, and I can see that, yes, there's an image. There's my text object with both hard-coded text and what are called text functions that produce like this point of view colas and actuals that you see. And here's my grid object, and my 4th object is my chart. So I can view it in PDF format like that, or I can press this button next to it and view it in web format, which gives me a little more dynamic capabilities of doing things like selecting the page. Evidently, this report has only one page item to select from, unfortunately. But I can also click up here and change what is called the point of view to view data from a different point of view. Here you see $259 for New York, March. Maybe I shouldn't have changed that one. Let me cancel out of that one instead, and I'll switch over to, we're looking at the colas data. And instead of the colas data, maybe I want to look at the root beer data. So I'll click on OK there, and you can see that the data obviously changed, as did the chart. But all of this is also available from, now I'm opening up Workspace. And in that same folder in Workspace, SBase Samples, you see that object here. So now I'm an end user. I didn't create this report. Somebody created it for me, and I just want to look at it. And I, over in Workspace, if I have access to it, I can view it in an HTML preview, pretty much like just what you saw in my web preview from the Financial Reporting Studio. And instead of looking at my actual data, maybe I'd rather look at my budget data. So I'll switch it over to budget here, click OK. The numbers should change, the chart should change, etc. So those are the 4 objects and how we look at them and so forth. Let's get back to some concepts here as opposed to looking at how it works. The advantages of using financial reporting are that it produces these highly formatted reports, as you just saw, in a wide variety of formats. The grids and the rows and the columns and the data cells within them, they can all have related content associated with them, meaning that, and I'm not going to show you this in the webinar today, but if you create related content, that means when you click on one of those items in Workspace, it will open up another report or go off to a URL and display a web page. Or there could be many related content objects associated with one item, and when you click on that item, then you'd have your choice of selecting which one you wanted to jump off to. The reports themselves that you create can be either dynamic or static, and the static ones are called snapshots. But a dynamic report, which is what you get by default, means every time somebody views that report, they're going out to the database and getting the latest data. But should you want to, for historical purposes, you can create a static snapshot report, which just takes a snapshot of that data at that point in time, and every time a user opens up that report, they see the data as it existed at that point in time. As you saw earlier, financial reporting also integrates with Workspace, so that reports can be viewed there by anyone given access to that report. And as I stated earlier, they can be scheduled for distribution. And the distribution of reports can be either I wanted to distribute them right now, or they can be scheduled at a specific time, like daily, weekly, monthly, etc. There are a couple of disadvantages, as there are to all products out there. Financial reporting, if you want to do quick ad hoc analysis of your database, this is not the product. And secondly, it only has access to multi-dimensional data sources as opposed to some other products that can access both multi-dimensional and relational data sources. So as I already showed you, when you open up Financial Reporting Studio, there are 2 main windows. The Explorer window, which shows you your folders and all the reports and objects that you have available to you to look at, edit, or possibly create. And if you're looking at them, editing them, or creating them, you're going to do it over in this Reporting Studio area that you see over here. So the basic flow of things is create a report. And once you create the report, you're going to have to add objects to the report, any one or all 4 of these types of objects. And then once you've added those objects, you can customize them to a very great extent. I'll show you very briefly what I'm talking about via property sheets and various other commands that are available for these objects. Once the report is completed, then in Workspace, you're going to administer folders and reports so that people have access to them. And you or the end user might want to create books from multiple reports so that in one book they can access the 25 or 30 reports that they want to look at or deal with. And then via this batch method, we can distribute the books and the reports within those books or individual reports across the enterprise. So let's do a little bit of this, and rather than in the book, let's do it live here. I need to go back to the Financial Reporting Studio. I'm going to manipulate the screen here, get out of this particular report for a moment, and I'm back in my Financial Reporting Studio Explorer window. And if I want to create a brand new report, I press this little button here. Another disadvantage of financial reporting is when you hover over these buttons, it doesn't tell you what they are, unfortunately, but you memorize them eventually. So I'm going to press that button, which automatically brings me into the Reporting Studio with a blank sheet to start with. And we've talked about the 4 different types of objects that you can add, and you add those 4 objects with those 4 buttons that you see here: a grid object, a text object, ABC, an image object that's supposed to look like a picture, and a chart object that looks like a bar chart. But in order for a chart to work, it has to have some data to work from. So you almost always start with a grid when you're talking about data. So I clicked on that button, my mouse pointer changed, and I moved it down into the area here and just clicked and dragged, and I'm drawing the area in which the grid will appear. And I select or create a brand new data source that I want to connect to. I happen to have Sample Basic already connected. I'm not going to create a new database connection. And I supply my username and password, and I get OK. And within this grid, I basically got 4 areas in which I'm going to drop things. What dimensions do I want to appear in my rows? What dimensions in my columns? What dimensions in my pages? And anything left over, if there's anything left over, remains in my point of view. Now, I'm not going to discuss the difference between pages and point of view. If you know it, great. If you don't know it, don't worry too much about it right now. But I'll drag product down to my rows area. I have to click on the icon, not the word product. And I click on the icon next to market, and I'll drop it in the columns. And let's say I'll drop year into the pages. Now, these are going to be my 2 point of view dimensions there. And then I have a grid, and if I looked at the grid right now via that print preview, it would be pretty simple because all I have is 1 row dimension, 1 column dimension, 1 page dimension, and the other 2 are in the point of view. Notice that the point of view is not visible within the PDF print preview, as opposed to if I preview it in web preview, oh, there's my point of view right up there. And I can actually, at that point in time, change it. If I don't want it to be a certain point of view, I can change it to another point of view. I can change the year if I had multiple page selections at that point in time. But we don't have multiple row dimension members, column dimension members, or page dimension members, so that begs the question, how do we get multiple members? And the answer is double-click on the row header, the column header, or the page area. Once I click on pages, you'll notice that year appears next to this formula bar, or I click up there. So I'm going to go down to product, and I'm actually going to double click on it. And now within there, I have a multitude, a plethora of ways of adding members. This isn't the best way to add members, but I'll do it. So now I have products 100 through 400 in my rows area. Notice that 4 rows don't appear here. All 4 members are in 1 row. I can make them appear in separate rows if I want. There is a big difference in why you should do it one way as opposed to the other, but again, that's a longer story. I'm going to do the same thing with market here. Remove my total market and select just the markets east through central here. Click OK. And I'm going to do the same thing with pages. Notice I'm going up here to this button and clicking. And I'm going to keep year as a possibility, and I'll select quarter 1 through 4 as my other pages. Click OK, click OK. I'm going to go into PDF print preview, and there's my first page with my year data, with my product 100 through 400, east, west, south, and central. It's not looking too good, but notice there are 5 pages here. So if I go to the second page, there's quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, etc. As opposed to, again, web preview, which when it comes up, I can select whichever one I want right there, and the data changed just about in the blink of an eye there. And of course, as I stated earlier, not only can I do that, but as opposed to in print preview, PDF preview, I can change my point of view member also and get different data also. This is my margin data. I can also export this report in query ready mode, which means if I were to click on that, it would open up Excel right away. It would drop that report into SmartView, connect to Sample Basic, and I could go on my merry way in Excel and do some ad hoc analysis from there. But I'm not going to do that. So back to the PowerPoint for a moment. So Select the grid button, draw the grid on the template, select the database, select the dimensions to populate the rows, columns, pages, and point of view. And then you select members for those dimensions as necessary, putting all the members in one row, or as you see down here, you can place the selections into separate rows. But there's a long story as to why you would want to do one as opposed to the other. And ultimately you come up with something. I think this is pretty much the same thing I created live. And yes, you can display it in print preview or web preview. This is the older print preview that was available in 11.1.1. What I'm demonstrating right now is 11.1.2, which now the print preview comes up in PDF format. So it is slightly different. I haven't updated the screen grab on this page yet. Now, to make it look pretty, well, then you're going to customize that report, each one of those objects via its properties or some other commands that are available. Every single object, grid, text, chart, image, has properties, but then even within something like a grid, each part of the grid has properties. Like pages have properties, rows, column headings have properties, rows and columns of data have properties, individual cells can have properties. I didn't point it out, but hopefully you noticed. Every time I select something, there's this properties area over here, which I can eliminate from view. I don't have to have it. I can click on that X and then review it later. But when I select different things, different sets of properties appear. So I selected the grid, and I have these set of properties that can customize the entire grid. Generally speaking, via the general category of options, or I can suppress things via the suppression category, or I can specify where it's going to appear on each page if there are multiple pages via this position set of properties. But notice I can also select, here I selected row 1, and now I've got properties for row 1. Here I've selected column A, I've got the properties for column A. Here I've selected the row header for row 1, and I can do things with it like display the member names or the aliases instead. I might as well switch to aliases here, and let's see what happens. So I'll switch to aliases, do a print preview, and what you used to see products 100 through 400. Now you see the aliases of colas, root beer, etc. So everything, even the data cell, here's that single cell has properties, including that related content that I talked about, where if you click on it and click on setup, you can say go to a specific document when that cell is selected. Pages have properties. There are selected pages. So there's all kinds of things that have properties that allow you to customize what that report is going to look like. And then within many of those objects, you can right-click them for a pop-up menu that allows you to do many, many other things. Like, I'll right-click on the row here, and I can copy that row, cut the row, paste the row, delete the row, create things called row and column templates. I can format the row. I can format it numerically, the alignment, the fonts, the borders, just about to your heart's content. I can, let's see what else I can do here. Select the row, right-click. I can conditionally format things. So only if a certain condition is met will I format it in this way. And I can insert rows, not just data rows, but formula rows where I can create complex formulas that will show specific data, and I can actually insert textual rows so that text items appear in the midst of your report without bothering things. So there are many right-click menu selections to choose from, or from which to choose. But besides grids, there are chart objects. So I've got a grid here. Let's create a chart from that grid. I'll click on the chart button. I don't have to hold it down. I move my cursor down here. Oops, I do have to click on it a little bit better than that. Notice my cursor has changed to a crosshair. I'm not holding the button down. Now I'll hold the button down and draw it, and there's a chart. Well, that's not the data for this chart because we don't see the data for that chart until, of course, we print preview it or web preview it. And now I see, I believe, the data, yes, fruit soda, cream soda, root beer, colas, etc. The same data in a chart format here. Sorry about that. There we go. As simple as that. And of course, now that I've created a chart object, there are chart properties with all kinds of things you can do to the chart, including formatting that chart in many different ways. A text object. Usually text objects you put in the header or footer area. You might have noticed that there was a little blocked off area up here at the top. That's my header area. It's indicated by this little green bar there, and I can move that green bar up and down, and it defaults, I believe, to a 1/2 inch. And if I scroll down here, you'll see there's a footer area. And you can certainly put text boxes in the body of the report, but most of the time you'll put a text box into the header or footer area. And you'll type in your text as needed, but anytime you need something that is getting actual data or information about the report, you can then insert a function. And I believe there's something like 32 functions here where I can say, I can find out who created the report, when was it created, what folder is it in, etc., etc. Or I can go and get certain data from certain cells. I can display member aliases up in my text box. And any time I add a function, then functions, of course, have parameters that you have to fill out in order to get the value that you want to get from this function. But the point being, text objects, you can enter static text or dynamic text via the use of text functions. So here, report generated on, there's the date function, and I use the special syntax to get the month, day, and year, which I'm sure you can figure out. And then, of course, our last object is an image object. Again, most often used in the header and footer area. I click on that image button, I drag my image area, and I select an image to appear there. Evidently that image was larger than the room I drew it in, and of course once I have an image, I can do other things with it via its properties, including stretch it out and so forth. So all kinds of things I can do there. I can bring it to the front, send it to the back, all kinds of things that I'm sure you're familiar with other software products. So ultimately, I create the report in the report designer. I can print preview it here, or ultimately in Workspace, I can view it there. And let's see if I can view my fantastic report right here. I'm going to save this report to a folder I created before called Craig, and I'll name this Test Report 2. Click on Save, and once I've done that, it should miraculously appear over here. Now I'm in Workspace, and I'll go to the Craig folder, and there's Test Report number 2, and if I just double-click on it, I look at that fantastic report I just created with the different pages and so forth, and the image and the text object, not too fancy a text object, and a chart and so forth. Simple as that. And ultimately, if you want to view things and distribute those reports, you're going to use Workspace. So I can view those reports in Workspace as HTML, as I just did when I double-clicked it, or if I go back to my Explorer window here in Workspace, I can also right-click on that report. And instead of double-clicking on it, I can say, show me it in PDF preview. And now I get it in a PDF format there. I prefer the HTML way, but maybe that's just me. And I can also collect multiple reports into what is called a book. I'll do that very quickly for you here. I'm going to do this command called File New Document. Notice it doesn't say anything about book at this point in time, but once I do that, it gives me a choice of what kind of documents I want to create, including one of them being collect reports into a book. I press my next button, and of course I have to select, well, what do you want to appear in the book? And I can select any of a number of financial reporting reports. I can select snapshot reports, and I can select non-financial reporting reports to appear in the book. So I'm just going to pick these two as an example here. Move it over to the right-hand side, and there's my Finish button. And I have my book here. It hasn't been saved yet. And if I just double-click this, my market happens to be my POV for this auto totals report. And if I double-click on this line here, it says, you know, you've only selected 2 reports, but if you would rather, you can select multiple items to appear. So instead of getting one auto totals report, I can get one for each market here. Sorry about that. I just needed to pause for a second. I'm going to move those over to the right-hand side here. Click on OK. And now you see East, West, South, Central there. What does all that mean? Well, first thing I need to do is slide up here and press my Save button. And I'll save it in my Craig folder as my test book here. Save that. Go back to my Explorer window. And there you see there's a test book there. And I'll double click on it. And notice that I had only selected 2 reports to appear in the book, but because I manipulated the point of view there and said, I really want 1 report for each of these markets, now I have 5 reports in my book here. And if I double click on any one of them, there's my West auto totals, and here's my Central auto totals, etc., etc. And lastly, I can distribute multiple reports via a batch process. I'm going to go back to my Explorer window and get rid of this little test batch that I had created earlier, I guess. And I'll say, you know what, I'm going to do a File New Document again, just like I did for the book. But this time I'm going to batch reports for scheduling. Scroll down here, press Next, and basically it's saying, well, what would you like to put into this batch? And I can go to my Craig folder and select those reports, or maybe I'll move up to the root level and select S-based samples again, and maybe select a couple of reports here. I don't know. It doesn't really matter at this point in time. And finish. Right now, again, this batch has not been saved. There are a couple of reports within it. If I decided I wanted more reports, I could add more reports. I could delete reports that are in it. But finally, I'm going to save it into my Craig folder and call it, I'm not too inventive, test batch here. And save it. And I'm going to get rid of this one for a moment here. I'm going to get rid of that one for a moment. So I've got this test batch on display. And when it's on display, I can schedule that batch for processing. I can name it anything I want here. I'll name it that. Again, not too fancy a name, but then I have to select which batch I want to use. I have to provide my password for a couple of different things here. Hopefully I spelled them both correctly. There I did. And there's a little fly in the ointment right here. It's not working quite the way I want it until I go back and I go to Next here. There's a number of things you can do here, like you can say, instead of performing it now, do it once, do it daily, weekly, as I talked about earlier. There's another thing that you should be able to do down here that I'm not able to do at this moment. Longer explanation on that, in which, sort of like the book, I can select multiple members for one report so that when I'm batching them, from one report, I could get 32 reports sent out for different dimension members. And then ultimately, where do I want to send them? Export as PDF, via email, etc., etc. I'm just going to save it as a snapshot in my repository in the same folder as the original object. The original object here was both in my SBase samples, so it should appear in my SBase samples area. I press next. I can get emailed whether it was successful or unsuccessful. There's a number of things that I can do. And it says the batch has been submitted successfully. Let's go see if it has. I'm going to go to SBase samples here, and I'm going to press this refresh button here. And hopefully I'll find it here, modified. I believe there's my charts object here. If I hover over this, notice it says snapshot report. That's not too great an example of what batching can do, but trust me, you can batch reports, multiple reports to multiple destinations. And if you really wanted to know whether it worked or not, you can come up here to navigate, schedule, go down to this thing called the batch scheduler, and I can find out that, yes, by golly, it did error. It looked like one thing worked, but something else erred. And I can go and show the details of what that was. And it said charts was run successfully, but something about the full year estimate didn't work properly. And that's what I found out when I looked at the results. So even though it erred, I could at least find out how it erred. And from the batch scheduler, I can reschedule it, duplicating this batch and editing the properties, going through the same dialogues you might have seen me do earlier. I'm just going to delete that batch from there. So, use financial reporting to create very nice looking reports for people to view. The people viewing them in Workspace can change the pages, they can change the points of view, it can trigger related content by clicking on things. There's a multitude of things to do in there. And then when you want to view things, view or batch things, you'll do that within Workspace. So that's a quick overview in 40 minutes of what financial reporting is about. And of course, your follow-up really is, if you want to contact us, we have a 2-day course on financial reporting. So please, if you have questions or if you're interested in the full training on financial reporting, we happen to have a class coming up a week from Monday. Check our website for that if you want to get signed up for the class here in the Twin Cities area. But contact me, Craig Messmering, via email or directly by phone, or contact HCG in any of the number of ways that you see there. So, thank you all for attending today. I hope you got a lot out of it, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.